They fired her in front of everyone, accused her of stealing money she never touched, humiliated her while customers watched, and destroyed her reputation in seconds. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that a stranger sitting in the corner booth had seen everything. And he wasn't just any stranger. His name was Caleb Monroe, and he had his own history with that diner. A history soaked in betrayal, stolen money, and a 15-year thirst for justice. That night, when Marissa Green stood in the parking lot with tears streaming down her face and nowhere left to turn, he made a choice that would change both their lives forever. This is the story of a poor waitress who lost everything in one night and gained everything she never knew she deserved. A story about false accusations and hidden truths, about a kind stranger who wasn't quite as random as he seemed, about second chances that come with secrets attached. Because sometimes the worst night of your life is actually the beginning of something you never saw coming. Sometimes the person who saves you has been watching longer than you think. And sometimes, just sometimes, rock bottom is where you find the strength to build something unbreakable. Her name was Marissa Green. She was 24 years old, exhausted, invisible, and barely surviving. She worked at a rundown diner on the edge of Houston, serving people who never learned her name, saving every dollar for a dream that felt impossible, and caring for a mother whose medical bills were drowning them both. She did everything right. Showed up early, worked late, smiled through the harassment, never complained. And they destroyed her anyway. But here's what they didn't count on. Marissa Green wasn't the kind of woman who stayed down, and the stranger who stopped for her that night. He wasn't the kind of man who walked away. This is their story, the story of how one act of humiliation became the catalyst for justice, how one conversation over coffee became a lifeline, how one business card became a future, and how a fired waitress became the owner of the very place that tried to break her. But before triumph, there was betrayal. Before partnership, there were secrets. Before trust, there was a test she never knew she was taking. So let me take you back to that Friday night in October, to the moment when everything Marissa thought she knew about fairness, kindness, and second chances shattered into pieces. To the moment when a man named Caleb Monroe sat in booth 12, watching injustice unfold and decided he'd seen enough. To the night that proved sometimes the people who save you are the ones who've been exactly where you are, and survived to tell the story. This is that story, and it starts with 3 words nobody ever wants to hear. You're fired. Leave. They fired her in front of everyone, over money she never touched. Marissa Green wasn't the kind of woman people noticed twice. Every morning at 3:45 a.m., her alarm screamed in the darkness of a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like mildew, no matter how much bleach she used. She'd pull on the same faded uniform, the one with the coffee stain near the left pocket that never came out, and walk 2 miles to Ricky's 24-hour diner on the edge of Houston. 2 miles. In sneakers held together with duct tape. She worked the late shifts, the ones nobody wanted. 4 p.m. till close. Sometimes later, when the weekend drunk stumbled in at 2 a.m. demanding eggs and bacon like it was a crime to be tired. At 24, Marissa had the kind of exhaustion that lived in her bones, the kind that made her look 30. Her hands were rough from years of scrubbing grease off plates. Her back ached from carrying trays that weighed more than they should. And her eyes, those brown eyes that used to sparkle when she was younger, now just looked empty. She'd dropped out of community college 3 years ago when her mother got sick. Lupus. The kind that eats away at you slowly, then all at once. The medical bills came in waves, each one higher than the last. Insurance covered almost nothing. So Marissa worked. She worked doubles. She worked holidays. She smiled through the pain and picked up shifts other waitresses called in sick for. Her father? Gone. Left when she was 7, said he was going to the store for cigarettes. Never came back. Now it was just her and her mother in that cramped apartment off Fulton Street, where the walls were so thin she could hear the couple next door arguing every single night. Marissa wasn't bitter about it. She didn't have the energy for bitterness. She just wanted to survive. To her, survival meant showing up, even when her feet bled inside those taped-up sneakers, even when customers snapped their fingers at her like she was invisible, even when her tips barely covered the bus fare she couldn't afford to take. The diner itself was nothing special. Cracked red booths, flickering neon sign out front that hadn't been fixed in a decade. The kind of place where truckers stopped for cheap coffee and nurses came after graveyard shifts looking half dead. Marissa knew every regular by face, though most didn't know her name. To them, she was just the waitress, the one who refilled coffee without being asked, the one who cleaned up their messes without complaining. Every night she wiped down tables smeared with ketchup and syrup. She smiled through insults from men who thought a $5 tip gave them permission to comment on her body. She served people who looked right through her, like she was part of the furniture. But there was one person who noticed her. Bryce Cooper, assistant manager, 28 years old with a baby face and cheap ties from outlet malls. He had small eyes that lingered too long, and a smile that never reached them. Bryce loved his little bit of power, the kind of man who peaked in high school and never got over it. He'd lean against the counter during slow hours, arms crossed, watching her move between tables. "You know, Marissa," he'd say, his voice dripping with false concern, "if you smiled more, customers would tip better." Just saying. She'd nod. Keep walking. Keep her distance. But in places like Ricky's, distance only made men like Bryce more curious, more persistent. He'd brush past her in the narrow kitchen hallway, closer than necessary. He'd make comments about her uniform being tight in the right places. He'd offer to give her rides home even though she never asked. Marissa always said no, politely, firmly. But Bryce didn't like being told no. Still, she needed this job. Needed it more than dignity, more than comfort. So she swallowed the comments, avoided his gaze, and counted down the hours until her shift ended. On good nights, she'd make $60 in tips. On bad nights, 20. Either way, it went straight into the jar she kept hidden under her mattress, the nursing school fund. A dream that felt more impossible every day, but one she refused to let die completely. Because Marissa believed in something most people had long forgotten, that if you just kept showing up, kept working hard, kept doing the right thing, eventually, life would notice. Eventually, someone would see her. She didn't know yet how wrong she was, or how right. The register came up short on a Friday, the same night the cameras mysteriously stopped working. It was early October, and the diner buzzed with the kind of chaotic energy that came with payday weekend. Truckers lined the counter, shoveling down meatloaf and mashed potatoes. A group of nurses from Methodist Hospital sat in the corner booth, too tired to talk, but too wired to sleep. And table 7, a loud pack of college kids from University of Houston, laughed and shouted like they owned the place. Marissa moved between tables with practiced efficiency, refilling coffee, dropping checks, smiling even when her feet screamed inside those duct-taped sneakers. Table 7 had been there for 2 hours. They'd ordered appetizers, entrees, milkshakes, and dessert. The bill came to nearly $200. When Marissa dropped the check, they barely glanced at it. One of them, a guy in a backwards cap, waved her off. "We'll get it in a minute," he said, not looking up from his phone. 20 minutes later, she came back. The table was empty. The check sat there, unpaid, with a single crumpled napkin on top. Marissa's stomach dropped. She grabbed the receipt and ran to the door, but they were already gone, tires screeching out of the parking lot. Bryce had been watching from the kitchen window. When her shift ended at 11, he called her into the back room. The space smelled like burnt oil and old coffee filters. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead. Bryce leaned against the counter, arms crossed, wearing that smile that made her skin crawl. "Marissa," he said slowly, "we've got a problem." She set down her apron. "What kind of problem?" "The register's short, $150. He paused, letting it sink in. "That was your drawer." Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. "I didn't take anything." Didn't say you did. He tilted his head, studying her like she was something under a microscope. But it was your register, your responsibility. Bryce, table 7 walked out without paying. I tried to stop them. Funny thing about that, he interrupted, turning the security monitor toward her. Every camera feed showed nothing but static. Cameras went down tonight, right around the time your drawer came up short. She stared at the screen, her hands starting to shake. You think I had something to do with that? I'm not thinking anything. He shrugged. I'm just doing my job. Mr. Rick's policy is clear. If your drawer's short, you're responsible. This is insane. You know I didn't. Do I? His voice dropped lower, colder. You've been pretty unfriendly lately, Marissa. Turning down rides, ignoring my advice. Maybe you've got an attitude problem. And there it was. The real reason. She'd rejected him one too many times, and this was payback. I want to talk to Ricky, she said, her voice barely steady. Oh, you will. Bryce pushed off the counter and opened the door. He's waiting for you. Ricky Molina, the owner, stood in his office with his arms crossed over his stained apron. He was 56, balding, with a red face that always looked one cheeseburger away from a heart attack. He'd hired Marissa 3 years ago and barely spoken to her since. Girl, I don't know what you were thinking, he started before she could even explain. But I can't have thieves working in my diner. I'm not a thief, her voice cracked. Table 7 walked out. I tried to stop them. Then why's your register short? Why'd the cameras go down right when you were closing? I don't know. Maybe you should ask Bryce why the cameras... Bryce has been here 5 years. You? You're just a waitress who can't keep her drawer balanced. He stepped closer, jabbing a finger toward the door. I trusted you. Gave you steady shifts when nobody else wanted them. And this is how you repay me? Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. I didn't steal anything, she whispered. Then prove it. He crossed his arms. Oh wait, you can't. Because the cameras are down. Bryce appeared in the doorway holding her final paycheck. Thought you might need this. Ricky sighed like he was doing her a favor. Get out before I call the cops. And don't bother using me as a reference. The world tilted. Marissa reached for the check with numb fingers, her hands trembling so badly she almost dropped it. She turned and walked out of the office, through the kitchen, past the servers who suddenly couldn't meet her eyes. When she stepped into the dining area, every customer looked up. Bryce had made sure of that. Whispers rippled through the room. Did she really steal? I always thought she looked sketchy. Can you believe it? And she seemed so nice. Marissa kept her head down and pushed through the front door. The October air hit her face, cold, sharp, unforgiving. Her apron slipped from her hands and fell onto the pavement. She didn't pick it up. Behind her, she could hear laughter. Bryce's laughter. She stood under the flickering neon sign, the one that read, Ricky's 24-hour diner, in red and yellow lights, and felt her entire world collapse. 3 years. 3 years of doubles and holidays and smiling through harassment. 3 years of saving every dollar for a dream she'd probably never reach. Gone. Just like that. Her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. The tears she'd been holding back finally came, hot and angry and full of shame. That's when she heard the engine. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, sleek and expensive, the kind of car that didn't belong in this part of town. The window rolled down slowly. A man's voice, calm and deep, cut through the noise in her head. Hey, miss? You okay? She stepped back instinctively, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. Her hands were still shaking. She was still holding that stupid apron, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying in front of strangers. The man stepped out of the SUV. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair and an expensive coat that probably cost more than her rent. His face was kind, but his eyes looked like they'd seen pain before. Real pain. The kind that leaves scars you can't see. You worked in there, right? He nodded toward the diner. Marissa's voice came out small. I did. Not anymore. He studied her for a moment, not in the creepy way Bryce did, but like he was trying to understand something. I don't want to pry, he said carefully. But what happened back there didn't look fair. Fair? She almost laughed. When had anything ever been fair? He reached into his coat and pulled out a tissue, holding it out to her like it was the most natural thing in the world. She took it, wiped her eyes. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why do you care? The stranger smiled faintly, sad, knowing. Because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, same feeling. A long silence stretched between them. Traffic hummed in the distance. The diner's neon sign flickered behind her. Then he said something that would change everything. Come on, let me buy you a cup of coffee, somewhere else. You look like you could use a friend. She stood there humiliated, with nowhere to turn. Most people face moments like this alone, but you don't have to miss what happens next. Subscribe so you never walk away from a story that could change how you see the world. She almost said no, but something in his eyes made her believe he understood what rock bottom felt like. The SUV smelled like leather, and something expensive she couldn't name. Marissa sat in the passenger seat, clutching that tissue in her fist, staring out the window as Houston blurred past. The man, the stranger, didn't push her to talk. He just drove, one hand on the wheel, the radio playing something soft and instrumental. She didn't know his name yet, didn't know why he'd stopped, didn't know if this was kindness or something else, but she was too tired to care. They pulled up to a small 24-hour cafe near downtown, one of those hipster places with Edison bulbs and chalkboard menus. It was the kind of spot Marissa had walked past 100 times but never went inside. Too expensive, too fancy, not for people like her. He held the door open. She hesitated, then stepped through. Inside, the cafe smelled like fresh coffee and cinnamon. A barista with a nose ring looked up from behind the counter, smiled politely, then went back to wiping down the espresso machine. Only 2 other people were there, a guy with a laptop and a woman reading a book. They sat in a corner booth. The stranger ordered 2 coffees and a slice of apple pie without asking what she wanted. When the barista brought it over, he pushed the pie toward Marissa. You should eat something, he said gently. She stared at the plate. Her stomach was in knots, but she hadn't eaten since lunch. A stale granola bar she'd found in her locker. She picked up the fork, took a bite. It was warm and sweet and almost made her cry again. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded, sipped his coffee, waited. Finally, she spoke. You said you've been where I am. What did you mean? The stranger leaned back, his expression thoughtful. About 10 years ago, I worked for a logistics company. Small operation, but I loved it. One day, money went missing from a client account. My supervisor blamed me, said I'd been skimming funds. He paused, his jaw tightening. I hadn't. But he was the owner's nephew, and I was nobody. So guess who got fired? Marissa looked up. What did you do? Spent 6 months unemployed, lost my apartment, slept in my car for a while. He smiled faintly. But I didn't give up. I rebuilt, started my own company, and now? He gestured vaguely. Now I'm doing okay. She studied him. The expensive coat, the calm confidence, the way he spoke like someone who'd earned his place in the world. What's your name? She asked. Caleb, he said. Caleb Monroe. Marissa Green. They shook hands across the table. His grip was firm but not aggressive. She noticed his hands weren't soft. There were calluses there, faint scars, hands that had worked for things. So what happened tonight, Marissa? He asked. If you want to talk about it. And somehow, sitting in that warm cafe with a stranger who actually seemed to care, She told him everything. About the missing money. About Bryce and his harassment. About the cameras going down at the perfect time. About Ricky firing her in front of everyone. She told him about her mother. About the medical bills. About the nursing school fund under her mattress that would never be enough. Caleb listened. Really listened. He didn't interrupt. Didn't check his phone. Didn't glance away. His eyes stayed on hers the entire time. When she finished, her coffee was cold, and the pie was gone. "You don't deserve what happened to you," Caleb said quietly. "Some people get punished for doing the right things until the right person notices." Marissa's throat tightened. "Nobody notices people like me." "I did." Those two words hung in the air between them. She didn't know what to say, didn't know what he wanted, didn't know if this was real or if she was so desperate for kindness that she was imagining it. Caleb reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, thick, embossed, with clean black lettering. Monroe Industries. Caleb Monroe, CEO, Supply Chain Logistics Consulting. He slid it across the table. "If you ever want a job," he said, "call me. My company's hiring for an assistant position. It's nothing glamorous, filing, scheduling, phone calls, but it pays well. And it's honest work." Marissa stared at the card like it might disappear if she blinked. "Why would you do this?" Her voice cracked. "You don't even know me." Caleb's expression softened. "Because 10 years ago someone gave me a chance when I had nothing, and I promised myself that if I ever made it, I'd do the same for someone else." She picked up the card with trembling fingers. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it." He stood, dropping 2 20s on the table. "The offer's real, Marissa. No strings, just a chance." He walked her back to the SUV and drove her home without asking for her address. She gave it, still in shock. When they pulled up to her building, he didn't make it weird, didn't ask to come up, didn't expect anything. "Take care of yourself," he said simply. Marissa stepped out, clutching that business card like a lifeline. As the SUV pulled away, she stood under the broken streetlight outside her apartment and read the card again. Monroe Industries. She didn't know it yet, but that card was about to rewrite her entire life. 2 days later, she made the call that would change everything, because sometimes desperation looks like courage. Marissa sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the business card she'd propped against the lamp on her nightstand. It had been there for 48 hours. She'd picked it up at least 20 times, dialed the first 3 digits, then hung up. What if it was a joke? What if Caleb had forgotten about her already? What if this was some weird scam? But then she looked at the eviction notice taped to her door. At her mother sleeping in the next room, her breathing labored even with the oxygen machine running. At the empty jar under her mattress where the nursing school fund used to be, now drained to pay for this month's medication. She had nothing left to lose. Her hands shook as she dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Monroe Industries, Caleb speaking. His voice was exactly as she remembered, calm, steady, real. Hi, it's Marissa, from the diner." Her voice sounded small. "Marissa." She could hear the smile in his voice. "I was hoping you'd call." "You were?" "Of course. Did you think about the job?" She closed her eyes, took a breath. "I'd like to, if the offer's still..." "It is. Can you come by tomorrow? Say, 10 a.m.? I'll text you the address." "Tomorrow?" Her heart raced. Yes, I can do that." "Good. And Marissa? Dress comfortable. This isn't that kind of office." When she hung up, her hands were still shaking, but this time from something that felt dangerously close to hope. The next morning, Marissa stood in front of a glass building in the Galleria district, staring up at the Monroe Industries logo etched into the entrance. The lobby was all marble floors and modern art, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. She'd worn her only pair of dress pants and a blouse she'd ironed 3 times. Her shoes were old but clean. She looked like someone trying very hard to belong. A receptionist with perfect makeup smiled at her. "You must be Marissa. Mr. Monroe is expecting you, 5th floor, corner office." The elevator ride felt like it took forever. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that looked nothing like she'd imagined. Yes, there were glass walls and sleek desks, but there were also plants everywhere, comfortable chairs, and people who looked happy. No one was yelling. No one looked dead inside. Caleb's office was at the end of the hall. The door was open. He stood when he saw her, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Marissa, thanks for coming." She sat, gripping her purse in her lap. He smiled. "You look terrified." "I am," she admitted. "Don't be. I'm not here to interrogate you, I just want to talk." He leaned back in his chair. "Tell me something. What do you want out of life?" The question caught her off guard. "What do I want?" "Yeah, not what you think you're supposed to want, not what's realistic. What do you actually want?" No one had ever asked her that before. Marissa swallowed hard. "I want my mom to stop hurting. I want to finish school. I want to wake up without feeling like I'm drowning." Her voice dropped. "I want to matter." Caleb nodded slowly, like he understood every word. "You already matter, Marissa. You just haven't been in a place that sees it." He slid a folder across the desk. "This is the job. Assistant to the operations team. You'd handle scheduling, client communication, document management. Starting salary is $50,000 a year, plus benefits." Her breath caught. 50,000? She'd been making 22 at the diner. I don't know if I'm qualified." "You are. You spent 3 years managing chaos in a diner. You handled difficult people with grace. You showed up even when it cost you everything." He leaned forward. "That's the kind of person I need. Not someone with a fancy degree. Someone who knows what it means to fight for things." Tears pricked her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone did it for me once, and because I think you're the kind of person who'll pay it forward someday." She looked down at the folder, at the contract inside with her name already typed at the top. "What if I mess up?" "Then you'll learn, and you'll try again." Caleb's voice was gentle. "Look, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to show up. Can you do that?" Marissa thought about the last 3 years, about the double shifts and the taped-up shoes and the customers who never learned her name, about showing up even when no one noticed. "Yes," she whispered. "I can do that." "Then welcome to Monroe Industries." She signed the contract with shaking hands. That business card was more than paper. It was a lifeline. But here's the thing. Most people never see the signs when help arrives. Subscribe before you miss the moment everything shifts. On her first day, she realized the hardest part wasn't learning the job. It was believing she deserved to be there. Marissa arrived at Monroe Industries at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, wearing the same blouse and pants from her interview. She'd spent the previous evening watching YouTube videos on how to be a professional assistant and had barely slept. The receptionist, whose name she learned was Jasmine, greeted her with a genuine smile and a welcome packet. Inside was her employee ID badge, a company phone, and a handwritten note from Caleb. "First days are hard. You've got this. C." Her workspace was a desk outside the operations department, clean, organized, with a new computer and a coffee mug that said "Fresh Start" on it. Someone had left a small succulent plant next to her keyboard. She didn't know who, but it made her want to cry. At first, the job was exactly what Caleb described. She answered phones, scheduled meetings, organized files, simple tasks, things anyone could do. But Marissa had spent 3 years anticipating needs before they were spoken. She'd memorized orders, predicted problems, read people's moods from across a room. Those skills translated. Within a week, she'd reorganized the entire filing system, color-coded by priority and date. She created a shared calendar that synced across departments. She noticed that client calls were being missed because people were in back-to-back meetings, so she started sending 5-minute reminder texts. Small things, but they added up. Caleb noticed. One afternoon, he called her into his office. "Marissa, I need you to look at something." He turned his computer screen toward her, a spreadsheet full of numbers and client names. She studied it, her eyes scanning the columns. "This invoice is wrong," she said after a moment, pointing to a line item. "The rate's different from what's in the contract, and this client was supposed to be billed monthly, not quarterly." Caleb leaned back, impressed. "How'd you catch that?" "I don't know. I just saw it." He smiled. "Our accountant missed that. You just saved us from a $15,000 mistake." Her eyes widened. "I did?" "You did." That night, Marissa took the bus home. She still couldn't afford a car, and stopped at the pharmacy to pick up her mother's medication. For the first time in years, she didn't have to choose between pills and groceries. When she got home, her mother was sitting up in bed, oxygen mask off, smiling. "Baby, you look different," she said. "Different how?" "Like you remember how to breathe." Marissa sat on the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand. "I got a good job, Mama, a real one, with a man who actually sees me." Her mother squeezed her fingers. "Tell me about him." So she did. She told her about Caleb and the coffee and the business card, about the glass building and the people who said good morning like they meant it, about the note and the plant and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, her life was finally turning around. But even as she spoke, a question lingered in the back of her mind. Why had Caleb really helped her? She didn't know it yet, but she was about to find out. 3 months in, he called her into his office and shattered everything she thought she knew about that night. Marissa had settled into a rhythm at Monroe Industries. She arrived early, left late, and somewhere along the way, stopped feeling like an imposter. The operations team relied on her. Clients asked for her by name. And Caleb, he'd become something between a mentor and a friend. They had coffee together most mornings. Not in his office, but in the break room, where he'd ask about her mother and she'd ask about his weekend. He told her about growing up in Austin, about starting his company from nothing, about the people who'd helped him along the way. She felt seen, valued, safe. Which is why when he called her into his office on a Thursday afternoon in January, she thought it was about a client presentation. It wasn't. Caleb stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the Houston skyline. His shoulders were tense in a way she'd never seen before. "Sit down, Marissa," he said quietly. "We need to talk." Her stomach dropped. Those 4 words never meant anything good. She sat, gripping the armrests of the chair. He turned to face her, and his expression was heavy with something she couldn't name. Guilt, maybe, or regret. "I need to tell you something," he began, "about the night we met." Her heart started to race. "What about it?" Caleb crossed his arms, then uncrossed them, like he was trying to figure out how to say something impossible. "I wasn't at that diner by accident." The room tilted slightly. "What do you mean?" He moved to his desk, pulled out a file, and slid it across to her. Inside were documents, business contracts, legal papers, financial records, all marked with one name: Richard "Ricky" Molina. Ricky, the owner of that diner, he was my business partner, 15 years ago. Caleb's voice was measured, controlled. We started a logistics company together. I put in everything I had. He handled the books. Marissa's hands trembled as she flipped through the papers. 6 months in, money started disappearing. Small amounts at first, then more. When I confronted him, he blamed our accountant, fired her, and covered his tracks. Caleb's jaw tightened. By the time I figured out it was him, he'd drained the business account and walked away, left me with nothing but debt and a ruined reputation. She looked up at him, her throat tight. "Why didn't you sue him?" "I tried. He had lawyers. I had nothing." The case went nowhere. He sat on the edge of his desk. It took me years to rebuild, and the whole time I watched him live off my money, running that diner into the ground. Marissa's pulse pounded in her ears. So you were there that night because I was planning to buy it back. He met her eyes. I'd been tracking his finances for months. He was drowning in debt, behind on payments. I was going to buy the diner through an LLC quietly, without him knowing who the real buyer was. The air felt too thick to breathe. So you saw what happened. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. You saw them accuse me. You saw Bryce set me up. Caleb nodded slowly. Every word. Something sharp and cold twisted in her chest. And you didn't say anything. I wanted to. You let them humiliate me. Her voice cracked. You sat there and watched them call me a thief, and you didn't say a word. Marissa, why? The question ripped out of her. If you knew I was innocent, why didn't you defend me? Caleb's expression crumpled. Because I needed to know who you were first. She stared at him, stunned. What? I'd seen employees come and go at that diner for months. Most of them deserved to be fired. Some were stealing, some didn't care. He ran a hand through his hair. But you were different. The way you treated customers, the way you worked even when no one was watching. I needed to see how you'd handle injustice, whether you'd fight back or crumble. Her stomach turned. So this was a test? No, it was... He stopped himself. Yes, in a way, yes. Marissa felt like she'd been punched. You used me. I gave you an opportunity, after letting me get destroyed. Her voice rose, shaking. You could have stopped it. You could have told Ricky the truth about Bryce, but instead, you sat back and watched me fall apart because you wanted to see if I was strong enough. Caleb's face went pale. That's exactly what it was. She stood, her legs unsteady. You said someone gave you a second chance, but that's not what you did for me. You engineered my rock bottom just to see if I'd survive it. Marissa, please. Was any of it real? Her voice broke. The coffee? The job? Or was I just some project to make you feel better about what happened to you? It was real. His voice was raw now. All of it. I saw someone who deserved better and I wanted to help. By testing me first. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not again. You should have told me. If I had, would you have believed in yourself? The question hung between them like a blade. That's not your decision to make, she whispered. She turned and walked toward the door. Marissa, wait. I need to think. She left the office, walked past her desk, past Jasmine at reception, and out into the cold January air. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. 3 months. 3 months of thinking someone finally saw her for who she was. But he'd been watching her like an experiment the whole time. Betrayal hits different when it comes from someone you trusted. If you've ever felt this kind of pain, you need to see how this ends. Subscribe, because walking away now means you'll never know if justice wins. For 8 days, she didn't answer his calls, until the news broke and she realized justice had been hunting Bryce all along. Marissa stopped going to work. She called in on Friday and told Jasmine she was sick. It wasn't exactly a lie. Her stomach hurt, her head throbbed, and sleep felt impossible. But the real sickness was deeper than that. It was the kind that came from realizing the person you trusted most had been playing chess while you thought you were just having coffee. Caleb called 17 times over the weekend. She ignored every call. He texted, "Please let me explain. I never meant to hurt you. You deserve to know. I'm sorry." She deleted them without responding. Her mother noticed. Of course she did. "Baby, what happened?" she asked Sunday night, watching Marissa stare blankly at the television. "I don't want to talk about it." "Did that man do something to you?" "No." "Yes." I don't know. Marissa pulled her knees to her chest. He lied to me, Mama. Or he didn't lie, but he kept the truth from me. I don't know which is worse. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Sometimes people do the wrong thing for the right reasons. Doesn't make it okay. But it doesn't always make them bad either." Marissa didn't respond. On Monday, she still didn't go in. She spent the day applying to other jobs, receptionist positions, retail, anything. By Tuesday, the guilt started creeping in. Not about Caleb, but about the team, about the clients who relied on her. But she couldn't face him. Not yet. Wednesday morning, everything changed. Marissa was scrolling through her phone when a news notification popped up. Houston diner under investigation for wage theft and financial fraud. Her heart stopped. She clicked the article. Ricky's 24-hour diner, a longtime Houston establishment, is under investigation following allegations of systematic wage theft and financial misconduct. According to sources, Assistant Manager Bryce Cooper has been arrested on charges of embezzlement after an audit revealed he had been transferring funds from the restaurant's register into a personal account over the past 18 months. The investigation was triggered after an anonymous tip led authorities to review security footage and financial records. Cooper allegedly manipulated camera systems to cover his tracks and falsely accused multiple employees of theft to deflect suspicion. Former owner Richard Molina declined to comment. The diner has been temporarily closed pending further investigation. Marissa read it 3 times. Bryce had been arrested. The cameras hadn't stopped working. He'd turned them off. And someone had tipped off the authorities. Someone. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "I know you're not ready to talk, but I thought you should know. The diner sold last week. And the new owner found some interesting discrepancies in the books. Justice isn't always fast, but it's thorough." Her hands shook. He'd done this. Caleb had bought the diner, audited the records, and turned Bryce in. Another text came through. "You were right. I should have told you everything from the beginning. But I meant what I said that night. You deserved better. I'm sorry I wasn't honest about how I was trying to give it to you." Marissa sat on her bed, staring at her phone, her emotions a tangled mess of anger and relief and confusion. Thursday afternoon, there was a knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find Caleb standing there, hands in his coat pockets, looking more tired than she'd ever seen him. "I'm sorry," he said before she could speak. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to say it to your face." She crossed her arms. "You bought the diner." "I did." "And you turned Bryce in." "The evidence turned him in. I just made sure people saw it." She stared at him, searching for the right words. "You said you needed to test me to see if I was strong enough. I was wrong." His voice was quiet, raw. "You didn't need to prove anything. You'd already survived 3 years in that place. That was strength enough." A long silence stretched between them. "Why didn't you just help me that night?" she asked. "Why make it so complicated?" Caleb exhaled slowly. "Because when someone saved me, they gave me a job. And for years, I wondered if I'd earned it or if they just pitied me. I didn't want you to feel that way. I wanted you to know, without a doubt, that you deserved everything you got." Marissa's throat tightened. "That wasn't your choice to make." "I know. And I'm sorry." She looked down at her hands, at the apartment that was a little less suffocating now because of the paycheck he'd given her, at the medication bottles on the counter that her mother could actually afford. "You hurt me," she said quietly. "I know. But you also saved me." Caleb's eyes glistened. "You saved yourself, Marissa. I just opened a door." She wiped her eyes, then stepped back from the doorway. "You want to come in?" He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "No, but I think we should talk, really talk." He stepped inside, and for the first time since that night at the diner, the air between them didn't feel like a performance. It felt real. She found the envelope by accident. and discovered he'd been saving her family long before she ever knew his name. 2 weeks after their conversation, Marissa returned to work. It was awkward at first, the careful smiles, the unspoken tension. But slowly, things settled into a new normal. One built on honesty instead of secrets. Caleb gave her space. He didn't hover, didn't push. But every morning there was still a coffee waiting on her desk, and sometimes tucked under the cup, a note. "You're doing great. Client loved your work. Thank you for coming back." Small gestures, but they mattered. By March, Marissa had been promoted to operations coordinator. More responsibility, better pay, and a real title that looked good on paper. She started taking night classes again, online, part-time, working toward that nursing degree she'd put on hold years ago. Her mother's health stabilized. The new medication was working. She could breathe easier, move without pain, even started talking about maybe getting a part-time job herself. For the first time in years, life felt manageable. One Thursday evening, Marissa stayed late to organize Caleb's office. He'd been traveling all week, and his desk looked like a paper bomb had gone off. She sorted through contracts, receipts, and files, creating neat stacks. That's when she found the envelope. It was tucked inside a folder labeled Confidential Monroe Foundation, sealed but not locked. The corner had torn slightly, revealing a glimpse of documents inside. She shouldn't have opened it. She knew that. But curiosity, and maybe something deeper, made her hands move before her mind could stop them. Inside were scholarship applications, dozens of them, all processed through something called the Monroe Foundation. She flipped through the pages. Tuition payments, medical grants, housing assistance, and then she saw it. A name that made her heart stop. Green. Teresa. Her mother's name. Marissa's hand started shaking. She pulled out the document, a medical expense grant dated 8 months ago, before she'd ever met Caleb, before that night at the diner. The amount, $47,000. She flipped to the next page, another grant, and another. Hospital bills, medication costs, specialist consultations, all paid in full by the Monroe Foundation. Her mother's entire medical debt, gone. She'd thought it was a charity her mother had applied to, some nonprofit that helped low-income families. But it was him. It had always been him. Marissa's vision blurred with tears. She stumbled back into Caleb's chair, the documents scattered across the desk. How long had he been watching her? How much did he know? The door opened. Caleb walked in mid-sentence into a phone call. "Yeah, I'll have those numbers by Monday." He stopped when he saw her face. "I'll call you back." He hung up slowly, his eyes moving from her face to the papers on his desk. "Marissa." "My mother." Her voice cracked. "You've been paying my mother's medical bills." He didn't deny it. "Yes." "For how long?" 8 months. She stood, her legs unsteady. "Before you even met me." Caleb stepped closer, his expression pained. "I was researching the diner. I wanted to know who worked there, who Ricky was exploiting. Your name came up. And when I saw your mother's situation..." He stopped. "I couldn't just ignore it." "So you've been watching me even longer than I thought." Her voice rose. "Tracking me, deciding whether I was worth saving." "No, that's not..." "Then what?" Tears streamed down her face. "What is this, Caleb? Some savior complex? Did helping me make you feel better about what happened to you? My mother died because she couldn't afford treatment." His voice broke. "Stage 4 cancer. We begged hospitals, applied for aid, sold everything we had. It wasn't enough. She died in pain, and I couldn't do anything to stop it." Marissa froze. Caleb's eyes were red now, his composure cracking. "After I rebuilt my company, I started the foundation. I swore I'd never let another family go through what we did. So yes, when I saw your mother's medical records, when I saw you working yourself to death trying to save her, I helped. Because I could. Because someone should have helped us." His voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't do it to manipulate you. I did it because no one should have to choose between rent and chemo, between food and insulin, between living and surviving. Marissa's anger wavered, replaced by something more complicated. You should have told me. I know. I thought we were finally being honest with each other. We were. We are. He stepped closer. I didn't tell you about the foundation because I didn't want you to feel obligated. I didn't want gratitude to ruin what we were building. She wiped her eyes. And what were we building? Trust, he said simply. Real trust. Not the kind based on debt or charity. The kind where two people see each other clearly and still choose to stay. Marissa looked at the scattered documents, at the proof of his secret kindness, at the man standing in front of her with tears in his eyes. You can't keep doing this, she said quietly. You can't keep making decisions for me, even good ones, without letting me in. I know. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, it has to be equal. No more tests. No more secrets. Caleb nodded. No more secrets. She took a shaky breath. My mother. Does she know? She knows the foundation exists. She doesn't know I run it. We should tell her. Okay. Marissa looked at him for a long moment. At the man who'd watched her suffer, and then quietly dismantled every obstacle in her path. At the stranger who'd stopped on the worst night of her life and refused to drive away. You're exhausting, you know that? She said, her voice soft. A faint smile crossed his face. I've been told. But you're good. Frustrating and controlling and impossible, but good. I'm working on the controlling part. She almost smiled. Almost. He'd been saving her family in silence. Most acts of kindness happen where no one's watching, just like this story almost slipped past you. Subscribe so you never miss the hidden truth behind what looks ordinary. 1 year later, she stood behind a counter again, but this time she owned the place. The neon sign glowed against the Houston twilight. Marissa's Place, where second chances are served daily. The same building, the same cracked parking lot. But everything else had changed. Inside, the old red booths were gone, replaced with comfortable seating and warm lighting. The walls were covered with framed photographs, community events, scholarship recipients, employees of the month, real people with real stories. Behind the counter, Marissa stood in a crisp apron with her name embroidered on it. Not as a waitress, as an owner. Caleb had offered her 40% ownership of the diner as part of a new business venture. She'd tried to refuse at first, it felt like too much, but he'd insisted. You know this place better than anyone, he'd said, and you know what it's like to work somewhere that doesn't value you. Build something different. So she did. She hired staff at $18 an hour, double what Ricky had paid. She offered health insurance, paid sick leave, and a scholarship fund for employees who wanted to go back to school. She created a Pay What You Can program for struggling families, funded quietly by the Monroe Foundation. The diner became more than a restaurant. It became a second chance factory. Tonight was the grand reopening, 1 year to the day after Marissa had been fired. The place was packed. Former regulars who remembered her, new faces drawn by word of mouth, local news crews covering the Houston woman who turned humiliation into hope story. Marissa moved through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling, feeling like she was living someone else's life. Her mother sat in a corner booth, oxygen tank beside her but mask off, beaming with pride. Next to her sat Jasmine from Monroe Industries, and 3 of Marissa's former co-workers who'd also been mistreated at Ricky's. They'd all been hired at Marissa's place. Caleb stood near the kitchen, staying out of the spotlight as usual, watching everything with quiet satisfaction. Then the door opened, and Bryce Cooper walked in. The room didn't go silent. Most people didn't recognize him. But Marissa did. He looked smaller than she remembered, thinner. His cheap tie was gone, replaced by a wrinkled button-down. He had the posture of a man who'd been humbled by consequence. He approached the counter slowly, eyes down. "You hiring?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Marissa tilted her head, studying him. A year ago, this man had destroyed her life for sport, had harassed her, framed her, laughed as she was humiliated. Now he stood in her diner, asking for work. "We are," she said calmly, "but I don't hire thieves." His head snapped up, recognition finally dawning. "Marissa." "You remember me," she said, her voice steady. "Funny how that works." His face went pale. I didn't know you." "Owned the place?" "No, you wouldn't. Last time you saw me, I was nobody. Just a waitress you could crush for fun." Bryce's mouth opened, then closed. "I'm sorry." "Are you? Or are you just desperate?" "Both." His voice cracked. "I lost everything. The arrest, the charges, no one will hire me. I just need a chance." Marissa leaned against the counter, her expression unreadable. "You know what's interesting about second chances? Some people get them because the world is kind. Others get them because they've earned them." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You set me up. You knew I didn't steal that money and you let me burn anyway. Why?" Bryce's eyes filled with shame. "Because you rejected me. And I'm a small, petty man who couldn't handle it. At least you're honest now." He nodded miserably. Marissa glanced toward the kitchen where one of her cooks, a formerly incarcerated man she'd hired 3 months ago, was laughing with the prep team. She looked back at Bryce. "I believe in second chances," she said quietly. "But I don't believe in enabling people who haven't changed. So here's the deal. You want to work here? You start as a dishwasher. Minimum wage. You show up on time, work hard, and treat every single person here with respect. You prove you've changed and maybe we talk about something more." Bryce stared at her, stunned. "You're serious?" "I'm serious, but Bryce?" Her voice hardened. "If you so much as look at someone wrong, you're gone. No second warnings, no excuses, clear?" "Crystal. Then come back Monday, 6 a.m. He nodded, backing toward the door. "Thank you." Marissa didn't respond. She just watched him leave, then turned back to the celebration. Caleb appeared at her side, handing her a glass of champagne. "That was generous," he said. "Or stupid." "Maybe both," he smiled. "But it's your place, your rules." She clinked her glass against his. "Strange, isn't it? A year ago I was standing outside, crying with nowhere to go. And now you're the one opening doors. Because someone opened one for me." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the community they'd built. Marissa thought about the girl she used to be, invisible, exhausted, convinced she'd never matter. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd been broken and rebuilt herself stronger. A woman who knew what rock bottom tasted like and refused to let anyone else swallow it alone. The neon sign flickered outside. And for the first time in her life, Marissa Green felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 6 months after the reopening, she finally understood the difference between rescue and partnership. It's who stays after the story's already been told. Friday afternoons had become a ritual. At exactly 2:30 p.m., Caleb's black SUV would pull into the parking lot of Marissa's place. He'd walk in, sit at the counter, always the same stool, third from the left, and order coffee and whatever special Marissa had cooked that day. Sometimes they talked about business. The diner was thriving, exceeding every projection. 3 employees had gone back to school. 2 had bought cars. 1 had moved out of a homeless shelter and into her own apartment. Sometimes they talked about nothing. The weather, a movie he'd seen, a customer who'd left a $1,000 tip with a note that said, "Pay it forward." And sometimes they didn't talk at all. They just existed in the same space, 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new. Today, Marissa slid a plate of blueberry pancakes across the counter, Caleb's favorite. "Still the best in Texas," he said, cutting into them. You say that every week. Because it's true every week. She smiled, wiping down the counter. The lunch rush had just ended, and the diner hummed with the comfortable noise of satisfied customers and clinking dishes. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night? Marissa asked, her voice quiet. Caleb paused mid-bite. Every day. Really? Really? He set down his fork. I think about the version of this story where I drove past, where I minded my own business and left you standing there. What do you think would have happened to me? He was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I think you would have survived anyway. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe it would have been harder. But you're not the kind of person who stays down. You don't know that. Yes, I do. His eyes met hers. You survived 3 years in a place that tried to break you. You kept showing up even when no one noticed. That's not luck, Marissa. That's character. She looked away, blinking back unexpected tears. Sometimes I still feel like that girl, the one with taped up shoes and nowhere to go. Good. She glanced at him, surprised. Remember her, Caleb said. Remember what she survived, because that's the part of you that built all this. He gestured around the diner. Success doesn't erase struggle. It just gives it meaning. A comfortable silence settled between them. Then Marissa asked the question she'd been holding on to for months. Why did you really stop that night? And don't say it was because you saw something in me. What was it actually? Caleb set down his coffee cup, considering. You want the truth? Always. I saw my mother. Marissa's breath caught. Not literally, he continued, but the look on your face, the humiliation, the exhaustion, the way you were trying so hard not to fall apart in public. That was her. Every time we got another medical bill we couldn't pay. Every time she had to choose between treatment and keeping the lights on. His voice roughened. I spent years wishing someone had stopped for her, had seen her. So when I saw you, you stopped. I stopped. Marissa reached across the counter and squeezed his hand. I'm glad you did. Me too. The bell above the door chimed. A young woman walked in, maybe 19 or 20, wearing a server's uniform from another restaurant. She looked nervous, scanning the room like she wasn't sure she belonged. Marissa recognized that look. She'd worn it for years. Sit anywhere you'd like, Marissa called out warmly. The girl chose a booth near the window, sliding in carefully. When Marissa brought over a menu and a glass of water, she noticed the girl's hands were shaking slightly. First day? Marissa asked gently. The girl looked up, startled. How did you know? Lucky guess. Marissa smiled. What's your name? Keisha. Well, Keisha, whatever you order is on the house today. First days are hard. You deserve something good. Keisha's eyes welled up. Thank you, you don't have to. I know, but I want to. Marissa pulled out her order pad. So what sounds good? As Keisha ordered, Marissa caught Caleb's eye across the counter. He was smiling. That quiet, knowing smile that said he understood exactly what she was doing. Paying it forward. When Marissa brought Keisha's food, chicken and waffles with extra syrup, she slipped a business card under the plate. Listen, Marissa said quietly. I don't know your story, but if you ever need anything, a reference, advice, or just someone to talk to, you call me, okay? Keisha picked up the card, reading it slowly. Marissa Green, owner. She looked up, confused. Why would you do this for me? Because someone did it for me once. Marissa glanced back at Caleb. And because one act of kindness can change everything. Keisha nodded, clutching the card like it was precious. As Marissa walked back to the counter, she felt it. That full circle moment where past and present collided. She'd been that scared girl in the booth, and now she was the person offering the lifeline. Caleb was finishing his pancakes when she returned. You're good at this, he said. At what? Seeing people. He stood, pulling out his wallet. Most of us walk through life blind to everyone else's pain. But you notice. Learned from the best. she said softly. He left 2 20s on the counter, way more than the bill, and turned to leave. But he paused at the door. Marissa? Yeah? I know I say this every week, but thank you for giving me a second chance too. Her throat tightened. You gave me more than a second chance, Caleb. You gave me a future. No, he said, his voice gentle. You built the future. I just held the door open. He left before she could respond. Marissa stood behind the counter, watching through the window as his SUV pulled away. Then she looked around her diner, at the photographs on the walls, at the customers laughing over meals, at Keisha in the corner booth, studying her business card like it held answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. Outside, the neon sign flickered to life even though the sun hadn't fully set. Marissa's place, where second chances are served daily. She thought about the journey, about being accused and fired and humiliated, about the stranger who'd stopped when he didn't have to, about discovering his secrets and choosing to forgive them, about learning that rescue and partnership weren't the same thing, but both mattered. She thought about her mother, healthy enough now to volunteer at the diner twice a week, about the employees who'd found stability here, about Bryce who'd worked his way up from dishwasher to line cook and hadn't missed a single shift in 6 months, about the Monroe Foundation scholarships that had already sent 4 employees to college, about the community that had formed around a place that used to represent her worst nightmare. She thought about all of it, the pain and the redemption, the betrayal and the trust, the falling and the rising. And she realized something profound. The kind stranger who changed her life hadn't just given her a job or paid her mother's bills or bought her a diner. He'd helped her remember something she'd forgotten in those years of invisibility. That she mattered. That her story mattered. That one person's kindness, combined with her own resilience, could rewrite everything. A customer called her name, pulling her back to the present. Marissa smiled, grabbed her order pad, and got back to work. Because that's what survivors do. They keep showing up. They keep building. They keep opening doors for the next person who needs someone to see them. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, the stranger who stopped becomes the person who stays. Not because of debt or obligation or guilt, but because some connections are built to last. Outside, the Houston sky deepened to purple. The neon sign glowed brighter, and inside Marissa's place, second chances were being served. One plate, one conversation, one act of kindness at a time. She went from accused to owner, from invisible to unforgettable, from surviving to thriving. But here's what matters most. Her story almost ended in that parking lot. It almost ended with humiliation and tears and the belief that good people finish last. It almost became another tragedy nobody remembered. Except someone stopped. Someone saw her when she was invisible. Someone believed her when everyone else called her a thief. Someone held the door open when the whole world was slamming doors in her face. That's the thing about second chances. They rarely look like what you expect. Sometimes they come wrapped in secrets. Sometimes they come from strangers with their own scars. Sometimes they come on the worst night of your life when you've lost everything and can barely breathe. Marissa didn't just get a job that night. She got proof that one person's kindness can rewrite an entire future. She got proof that showing up, even when it costs you everything, eventually puts you exactly where you're meant to be. She got proof that the worst thing that ever happened to you might actually be the beginning of the best thing that ever happened to you. Today, Marissa's place isn't just a diner. It's a monument to resilience. A testament to what happens when someone who's been broken decides to build something unbreakable. It's where second chances are served daily, not just in words, but in wages, in opportunities, in the quiet act of seeing people who've been invisible too long. And Caleb? He still shows up every Friday at 2:30, still orders the same coffee, still sits on the same stool. Not because he's her savior, but because she reminded him why he built his empire in the first place, not for revenge, but for redemption. They saved each other. That's the truth. She reminded him what kindness looks like. He reminded her what she was worth. So here's what I want you to remember. Right now, somewhere, there's another Marissa. Another person working themselves to exhaustion, invisible, one bad day away from losing everything. And there's another Caleb, someone with the power to stop, to see, to offer a hand. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're the one who needs to stop. Or maybe you're the one who needs someone to finally see you. Either way, this story is proof that it only takes one person, one act of kindness, one moment of being seen. She went from accused to owner, from invisible to unforgettable. But thousands of stories like hers end differently, because no one stayed to witness them. Subscribe. Be the person who sees the whole story, not just the headline. Because every week, we bring you stories that prove resilience isn't rare. It's just rarely celebrated. Don't miss the next one. The world tried to erase Marissa Green. Instead, she became unforgettable. And that diner, the one that fired her, humiliated her, tried to destroy her, it's hers now. Justice isn't always fast, but when it comes, it's permanent.